All right, Bears fans, we are happy to be joined here at Picks or Polls by a special guest today, Tracy Sandler. She's the founder and CEO of the Fangirl Sports Network and host of the Tracy Sandler Show on Believe. Tracy's beat reporter covering the San Francisco 49ers, which is pretty important considering that we have a game this weekend to talk about that just so happens to involve the San Francisco 49ers playing the Chicago Bears for week one, kicking off the 2022 season. You know, it's exciting. You know, football's back, and we're, of course, really excited to have Tracy on the show today to give us some much-needed insight on the Bears' week one opponent. But before we get into our football discussion today, Tracy, it's great to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. We made it to week one. I feel like we've been talking about week one of the NFL season really since the end of the Super Bowl. So it's really great to finally be here. And yeah, I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, it's been a long off season, and I think we're all just ready to talk about games that actually matter at this point instead of all the speculation. But I mean, we have a little bit of speculation to do right now because we have to talk about some of the major storylines, I think, going into this week one game. And the first major storyline I think that is going to be the big one for this game is we have Trey Lance against Justin Fields as the quarterback matchup. Two guys from the 2021 quarterback draft class, which was looks like a pretty talented quarterback class going forward here. And, you look at that. Obviously, this is Trey Lance's first full season as the starter for the 49ers. Last year, it was Jimmy Garoppolo. He was the guy. And now, Trey Lance, he spent the entire offseason as pretty much given the keys to the franchise here as a starting quarterback. So I think the first question I have for you, Tracy, is, how has Lance progressed based off what you've seen from this year and last year, just kind of making that comparison, and what are the expectations for him, both internally and kind of externally, for this season?
Well, I think you see someone who certainly has the confidence and poise ready to take over the team. So I think that's an important thing, has those leadership skills, which is also important because that was one of the things that people really loved about Jimmy Garoppolo. And now that he's in the locker room, it's important for Trey Lance to exhibit those same kinds of skills. From a football perspective, we've been able to see through training camp and a little bit in the preseason, the ability is there, the potential is there. There have been flashes of play. But he is essentially a rookie quarterback. Yes, it's his second season, but where Justin Fields may have a slight advantage over Trey Lance is that he started for a year. Trey Lance started 2 games last year. He didn't play a whole lot in college. So this is a big thing for him coming into this week one as a starter. And I think the expectation is, and should be, I say this to 49ers fans all the time, is that it is going to be an up and down season. Like I said before, the ability is there. The flashes that are there. You can see off-schedule plays are going to potentially be very exciting for San Francisco. But it will be a little bit up and down. The accuracy is not 100% there. He's still, getting chemistry with some of his receivers. I've been saying to 49ers fans, I really feel it'll be 2 or 3 years before we see the full potential of Trey Lance. Do I think he will play well this season? Yes, but I think the expectation should be kind of what we saw in training camp, where there were a few days that were great, and there were days that were not, and it's just to be expected right now.
So kind of going off that, Andrew mentioned Jimmy G, you mentioned Jimmy as well. I mean, there was so much speculation, especially throughout the summer months, that Jimmy was possibly going to be traded. There were a couple teams that were linked to him, but the 49ers a couple days ago kind of brought Jimmy back, worked out his deal, restructured the whole thing. What impact do you think that has on a locker room that kind of went into the offseason expecting uncertainty at the QB position, despite having Trey and Jimmy all throughout last season?
Well, I don't think the locker room had any uncertainty about the quarterback position. The locker room, I think, was very clearly under the impression and understanding that Trey Lance was going to be the quarterback. The 49ers did want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. He had the offseason shoulder surgery on his throwing arm that really thwarted that. They admit that there were no concrete offers, but there were talks going on with various teams. He had the shoulder surgery, and then a number of things happened in the offseason that nobody could have predicted. And all of those things made it to that when he was healthy and cleared to throw, there weren't a lot of options. So it really kind of made sense for both sides. From a locker room perspective now, we're back in the locker room this season, which is great. So I can actually speak to the locker room. And from a locker room perspective now, it doesn't feel weird. I would say personally, the first day at practice that Jimmy was back, and it's only been a few days that he's been back, the first day that he was back, it felt a little weird from the outside. I don't think it's weird to them. It doesn't feel weird to them right now. What will be interesting to see as the season goes on is when Trey struggles, because he will struggle, that's just the nature. When Trey struggles, what happens? But Kyle Shanahan actually spoke to that today, and he spoke to the fact that the quarterback position is the position that's going to get the most criticism no matter what. And that even if Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't there when Trey struggles, people, Twitter, fans, whatever, are going to calling for his head. It was the wrong choice, et cetera, et cetera. And he made a really good point. He said, there were times where Jimmy struggled and the locker room got behind him. When Trey was there, when Trey wasn't there. So he expects the same thing to happen now. And I expect the same thing to happen now, because this was a team that 100% to a man that we talked to was ready for Trey Lance to take over, expected him to take over, excited for him to take over, understood that he's essentially a rookie quarterback. I mean, George Kittle had said a couple times, he has a lot of pieces around him. So if he struggles, there are a lot of us there to help him out. There's an interior of the offensive line issue. So that also will add to the struggles. But in terms of the locker room with these two quarterbacks, I don't think it's really going to be an issue. And they did it last year. It's different. It definitely is different. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. And part of that also is because of who Jimmy is and who Trey is. And I think they'll be fine. Now, let's talk in week 7. But I think they'll be fine.
It's as the old saying goes from Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, so to speak. So yes, we'll see how those first weeks go. But, I mean, you talk about who they are as people in the locker room. It's nothing wrong with having a really good backup quarterback, especially if you're a team like the 49ers who were so close to making the Super Bowl last year. So always nice to have a contingency there in case injuries happen, in case things go wrong.
I mean, you could say in terms of a quarterback room, I kind of think they're in the best position in the league. I'm not saying either of them are the best quarterbacks in the league. I just think they're in a pretty fantastic position that, let's say Trey did get hurt. And last year we saw Trey did get hurt. He didn't play that much, and he did get hurt a couple of times. If Trey were to get hurt, if he were to miss a couple weeks, if you have Jimmy Garoppolo coming in as his backup, your season doesn't get derailed, which is a very rare thing in the NFL. Usually you lose the quarterback and that's about it. But that wouldn't be the case here. And I think they're in a pretty unique position if they can make it work. And I think that's the whole thing. We don't know. It's easy to talk about the locker room before the year has even started. But if they can make it work, they're in a pretty unique and probably enviable position for a lot of teams.
Yeah, you talk about the quarterback position being a unique one, but another position group to focus on here for the 49ers has to be the offensive line as well. That's another big storyline because the 49ers, they lost 2 starters from last year on their offensive line. Obviously, left guard Lincoln Tomlinson, he left them free agency to go to the New York Jets. He's been a pretty solid left guard for them over the past few seasons. And they also saw Alex Mack, their center, retire after a couple years with the team as well. He's been one of the better centers in the NFL for quite a long time. So you obviously have the literal alien elite left tackle in Trent Williams, who's ageless at this point, coming off one of the most dominant seasons we've seen from a tackle in NFL history. And Mike McGlinchey, it seems like he's going to be back healthy at right tackle based off of what I've seen. I'm not sure there's any light you can kind of show on that. But the interior is a bit of a question mark at this time. What did the 49ers do to address that this offseason, and how do you see that group playing out as the season progresses?
Well, I think the interior of the offensive line, to me, I've been talking about it this whole offseason because to me that's almost a bigger storyline than the quarterback. And part of this is because that interior of the offensive line could very well affect the quarterback. Luckily, they have Kyle Shanahan who can scheme a lot and make up for it in a lot of ways. You have a mobile quarterback, but it's going to be an issue. And Mike McGlinchey was back at practice. He does seem to be healthy. That seems to be fine. But the interior of the offensive line is shaky at best. They're hoping that second-year player Aaron Banks, who did not play at all last year, is going to step up and be the second-round draft pick that they picked in 2021. They certainly didn't see it last year because he didn't play at all. Kyle Shanahan has said that if things had gone differently when they were 3-5, perhaps he would have gotten in, but he didn't. So because you basically have another essentially a rookie protecting essentially a rookie. The question marks at center. Daniel Brunskill has a hamstring injury. It kept him out of practice today on Wednesday. So it's going to be an issue. It is definitely going to be an issue. I don't know the starting offensive line that we see on Sunday in the first series. I don't think is going to be the starting offensive line every week. I don't even know that group is going to stick together throughout the game. But the thing with an offensive line that is, of course, very difficult is how important chemistry is. And I don't know that this group is ever going to be completely cohesive throughout the season because they're going to have to shuffle them around. You are right. They have Trent Williams. It's a shame that Trent Williams can't just lie down and stop everybody because he is the best left tackle in the league. And, McGlinchey should come back after the injury and play well, but they got a lot of questions there and it's going to be an issue. I don't see any way that it can't be an issue.
So let's talk dynamic playmakers because you have tight end George Kittle, who I think I saw on Twitter today is nursing an injury. So he's hurt. And then you've got wide receiver Deebo Samuel, kind of had a crazy offseason between him possibly being traded to locking him up. But, what are some weapons for the 49ers that the Bears are going to have their hands full with? And name some people that could make an impact for the 49ers in this game and throughout the season.
So first of all, with George Kittle, I know I said he was hurt. He has a groin injury and they don't know his status for Sunday. So that becomes a big one too. Just quickly going back to our other conversation, because not only is he George Kittle, but he's so integral to the blocking game, to the run game, to blocking. And I said that so weirdly, but he's such an integral blocker. That's what I was going for. So that becomes something very important to watch. But of course, you mentioned Deebo Samuel, who did have a somewhat crazy offseason, but he's been back, obviously a tremendous playmaker. And the thing with Deebo is no matter how they use him, whether they use him as a wide back or not, is teams are going to have to prepare as if they're going to use him as a wide back because you never know what's going to happen. I think Brandon Ayuk is poised to really have a breakout season. The chemistry between him and Trey Lance has just been fantastic. They trained together all offseason, and it showed on the practice field. So that is another playmaker for them. Jawan Jennings is someone who will be interesting to see how he fares this season. He really came alive last year. So we'll see. And then a new rookie, Danny Gray, who's one of the fastest, probably the fastest receiver they've had in a very long time. Again, it kind of goes back to what I said about Deebo. The benefit they have with these playmakers is that teams have to prepare for all of them, whether they use them all or not. You don't know if Danny Gray is going to be playing week 1 or whenever, but you got to prepare for him as if he is. And then in terms of the run game, Elijah Mitchell, second-year player who really had a breakout season last year, late-round draft pick. The 49ers really kind of excel with these late-round gems, but late-round draft pick who had a heck of a season, just had trouble staying injured. So should he be able to stay healthy? That is going to be a big thing. And, they have a number of running backs on that team, but I think Elijah Mitchell will be one very much to watch and see. And then they'll have that room, the Ty Davis Price. They have Jordan Mason. They have Jeff Wilson Jr. It's going to be an exciting running back room, but health is always an issue with 49ers running backs. I think health is an issue anyways with running backs, but always an issue with 49ers running backs. But I think in terms of the kind of elite playmakers that I see on the horizon, of course, are Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. And I'm really excited to see what they do with Danny Gray because you've got a big arm with Trey Lance and a very fast receiver. And those are just things they haven't really had in quite some time.
Yeah, we were a big fan of Danny Gray in this podcast during the draft process. So I'm excited to see how he does for the 49ers. And I got Ayuk and a couple of my fantasy football teams here. So I'm kind of hoping for a big year from him.
I think he is poised to have a really big breakout year. So you heard it here first, but I'm sure you've heard it other places. But I really think that you're going to see him evolve into a star.
Well, that's good news for my fantasy football team then. But switching over to the defensive side of the ball here, obviously he has been true cornerstones in this front 7 unit with Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, one of the best linebackers in the game, and Eric Armstead. But the secondary is a unit that isn't really as discussed, I think, when we're regarding this defense as a whole. So who are some of the key players in the secondary that the Bears need to keep an eye out for this upcoming week?
Well, the 49ers went out in free agency and did something they haven't done in a very long time, which is get a true shutdown corner. Probably get a top 5-6 corner in the league in Charvarius Ward, whose nickname is Mooney, and he likes to be called Mooney, which will be great if he's on Mooney, because I am really in for a Mooney on Mooney crime tweet. So I'm just hoping for all of that right there. But I think that has been just a total literal game changer for San Francisco. On the other side, you have Emmanuel Moseley, who now is been playing even better, who's probably playing the best that he's played in his career. We'll, of course, see when the actual season starts. But it makes a real difference when you have a true number one corner, then Emmanuel Moseley can complement him in the way that he should and doesn't have to play the role of true number one corner, because that's not really who he is. It's not a knock on him. It's just not really who he is. Samuel Womack is a rookie that looks to be the starting nickel, which is pretty fantastic for him. Another late round gem for San Francisco. I think that was a surprise for a lot of people, not for this people, because I talked about it pretty early, but I think that was a surprise for a lot of people. And he is a rookie, and of course not perfect, but certainly has been playing very well, and playing well enough that they let a couple other people go because they had that much confidence in him and his ability. And they lost K'Wan Williams in free agency, and so Womack will take over that role. So all of a sudden the secondary is very talented at the corner position. Now they're starting the season with Jimmy Ward on IR, which is a huge loss for San Francisco. I think he's a very underrated safety in this league. And so that becomes a huge loss. They're excited about Talanoa Hufanga, who is starting beside him. They are not saying yet, which is not a big shock to anybody, but that is a big loss for them. But I think the benefit at least is that by having Charvarius Ward as their CB1, it just shores everything up. So when you lose a Jimmy Ward, of course it's a huge loss, but it's not as if all the talent has now left the building, so to speak.
So speaking of talent, right, how about 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans? He's going into year 2 with the unit. I think last year was a great year for him to just continue doing what he's done, or what the 49ers have done under Robert Saleh. This year, he's had an entire offseason to kind of prepare. Things are back to normal. What has DeMeco done to put his stamp on the unit?
Well, I think he's really, just like you said, continued to just continue what Robert Saleh started. And there really was no drop off last year, except in the secondary where things were a mess. Jason Breck gets injured in week 1, and then that other corner position becomes, completely up in the air, but they worked around that. So I think what he's done is he's taken an elite unit and kept it elite. And I think this defense will be even better this year because they're better in the secondary, because he's had another year with this unit. We haven't talked about Javon Kinlaw, who's someone that the 49ers are very excited about and feel like, if he can stay healthy, is going to be have a tremendous impact on this team. So I think what DeMeco Ryans has done has just made this unit even better, continue what Saleh started. And this was an elite defense. And the fact that they've gotten even better, he interviewed for head coaching positions in this offseason, actually towards the end of last season, he chose to stay with San Francisco. But I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up as a head coach somewhere next year or the following, because really what he's done with this unit to keep them together, and he and his staff to make them even better, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, especially in the playoffs, getting to see them absolutely demolish that Packers offense in the playoffs there. I'm sure every Bears fan was having a good time with that one. But kind of transitioning to kind of what the 49ers did in the draft this year, they did not have a first-round pick due to the Trey Lance trade, but they still managed to make 9 selections in the 2022 NFL draft. Out of this class so far, who has stood out the most to you, and who do you think is going to play a big role for this team this season?
Well, I talked about Samuel Womack, and so think he probably will make the biggest impact. But, that being said, Danny Gray is going to have tremendous potential in this offense. Ty Davis-Price is going to have tremendous potential in this offense. Davis-Price is a very physical back. And we got to see a little bit in the preseason what they liked so much about him and how important that is to this offense. So I think that will have a big impact. I want to give credit to Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, who made the team as QB3, which is pretty impressive. So I think there's that. But I think you're going to see Womack and Gray probably make the biggest impact this year, but I wouldn't sleep on Ty Davis Price because there's potential. And then, of course, Drake Jackson, who's coming along extremely well. A lot of people surprised he made it past the first round. I don't know that he's going to be the guy this season, but I think he'll make an impact. I think he will be helpful on the other side of Nick Bosa on the other end of the line. And I think Drake Jackson, you can see the talent, you can see the potential. And I would say from week 1 to week 17, I expect that we're going to see tremendous strides from him.
So last question from me here, and I can't let you go without asking you this, but 2022 marks Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's 6th season together. The 49ers are 3 years removed from a Super Bowl. It's about, a year since the team traded for Trey Lance, a little over, 14, 15 months, right around there. But what exactly are the expectations for this GM head coach duo going into their 6th season together? Because I think if you're the ownership group, you're looking at this and you're saying, yeah, we've seen a lot of good, but we've also come up short at times.
They have come up short at times, but I think the thing to remember with the NFL is it's really, really hard to get to a Super Bowl, and it's really, really hard to win one. So I think when you look at them being a few years removed from the Super Bowl, they had the COVID year, which was a kind of a disaster of a year for everybody, of course, but from the football perspective. And then the next year they go to the NFC Championship game. And if I'm ownership and if I'm a 49er fan, I would look at this team being 3-5, and really it could go one way or the other. They were at 1.3-5. It looked like the sky was falling, and they end up in the NFC Championship game. They draft this young quarterback who, like I said at the beginning, we're not going to know this year what he is. I think we'll see some of it, but we're not going to know what he is. So I think the expectations should be, if it were me, the expectations would be get to the playoffs, win a playoff game, maybe you win a 2, you get to the playoffs, and then, of course, it all starts over. I see the team as a 10 or 11 win team with a wild card berth, and then you see what happens. I actually would not be surprised if they end up in Dallas and Green Bay again in their first 2 playoff games. But I think that has to be the expectation, because the other thing I would say for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch is the culture has changed so dramatically since they got here or got to San Francisco, that there has to be something to be said for that too. I mean, even when the team was 0-9 in their first season, just the mood in the locker room was the mood of a group of people who had bought in. And I think, so they had 2017, 2018, Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt game 3. That's the end of that. Next year, Super Bowl, next year, COVID, next year, NFC Championship game. So I think for this year, it's get to the playoffs. Obviously, everyone wants to win a Super Bowl every year. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. This roster is built for that. But it is, of course, going to depend a lot on the play of their very young quarterback. So to me, the expectation would be you get to the playoffs, you win a couple games, and you kind of go from there. But I think the other thing you want to see is improvement from Trey Lance from week 1 to week 17, like I said about Drake Jackson. And I think if the team plays well, he continues to improve, and they're in the playoffs, they win a game or 2, things are looking very good. That would be my feeling on that.
Yeah, I think us Bears fans are kind of seeing with this new coaching staff coming in that you can't underestimate what culture can do for your franchise. And we've seen that with the 49ers over the past few years, going through a lot of adversity as well. So last question for me, Tracy. What's your prediction for Sunday's game? Who do you think is going to win? And what do you think the score is going to be for this one?
I'm so bad at picking scores. I'll do it. But just know that because I said it, it's definitely not going to happen. I do think the 49ers are going to win this game. I think, obviously, any given Sunday, anything can happen. But I do think they are, no offense, a far superior team on the talent side. And so they should win this game. It might be closer than people think just because it is week 1. It might rain. It'll be not Trey Lance's first start, but his first start as the anointed QB1 of the team. But I would say the 49ers win this game 28-14.
Yeah, week 1, anything can happen, but as a Bears fan, I struggle not to agree with you on this one. Just the way these teams are at.
Guys. And you guys were so nice to have me on, so I really feel bad about this.
Absolutely. Well, we loved having you on. And, just for our viewers and listeners out there, where can they find you on social media and find your work out there moving forward for this season?
Well, please listen to my podcast, The Tracy Sandler Show. We are twice a week on the Believe Network, Tuesdays and Fridays. You can find me on Instagram at Tracy Sandler. Find me on Twitter at 49ers Fangirl. And I'll just throw one more thing at you all. FGSN.com is the website. So any of those places, you can find me. And thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun talking about the 49ers, talking about this game. And we hope to see you around, hopefully back in the podcast another time. It was really fun talking with you today.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.